Stats and facts aren't the only form of preparation we need to do ahead of a football commentary. There's also the logistical element to consider, from making sure we have all our equipment packed to what we're going to wear. This is how a commentator prepares for match day. Welcome to Sheepskins for Goalposts.
And he scored!
When our working environment changes from one week to the next, we need to be well prepared and well versed in our logistical pre-match routine. There are many different elements to consider before we set off. When driving, we need to know the route and how long it takes to get to our destination, or check the train times, bus times, walking distances. This is a job we cannot afford to be late for. The work won't wait for us. If we're driving, another important factor is where am I going to park? Not all clubs provide parking, which can add to the logistical headache, especially if we don't know the area or it's very built up and there are matchday parking restrictions. We need to give ourselves extra time to get there if there's any chance of being delayed. How far in advance we arrive at a game will depend on our pre-match commitments and our on-air time, but generally most commentators would arrive anywhere between 90 minutes and 3 hours before kickoff. Many radio/audio commentators have their own broadcast equipment to set up and are presenting sports shows which start well before the match itself. They need to arrive very early. TV commentators often have to be in place for a sound check well in advance of the game starting. When it comes to equipment, there's nothing worse than being confined to a tight space in a stadium commentary position or press box, trying to commentate when we see that the broadcast equipment is low on power and we've left the spare batteries in the car. Or the only pen we brought with us has no more ink. Or worse still, we've forgotten our glasses, which I've done on several occasions. Some of the many predicaments we've all been in as commentators, but which we can avoid with proper preparation. For example, if you're a self-producing BBC local radio commentator in the UK, covering an away game, well, there's a whole host of logistical things you need to consider before you even pick up the microphone to start commentating. You effectively need a checklist of equipment and a to-do list for the jobs that need doing. Even a TV commentator who doesn't have to worry about technical equipment needs to make sure in advance they have everything they need to do their job. In addition to the Sheepskins for Goalposts content here on YouTube, our Patreon page offers the chance to join the SFG community and gain further tips and advice from our live stream Q&As, personal commentary critiques and one-on-one tutorials. The link for our Patreon page is in the description below. The other thing to consider is space, or in a lot of instances, a lack of it in press boxes and at some grounds or stadiums. We sometimes find we need to improvise, even be a contortionist or a juggler, depending on where we're positioned. TV commentators tend to, in most cases, have a more spacious working environment. That's not always the case for those working in radio. I've sat on the top of a dugout in sub-zero temperatures with no table and no protection from the elements. I've been put on rooftops in windy conditions, and more times than I can remember been wedged into a confined cockpit-sized space for the duration of a game or longer. You don't always have the luxury of space or electrical power points, so you need to be adaptable, improvise, and make sure you remember to have spare batteries on hand. When it comes to the weather, don't leave it to chance. We need to look at the forecast, find out if we can where we'll be seated, whether it's open to the elements or well sheltered. Are we going to spend the entire game with the wind in our face? Can the rain get to our equipment, or will we be in the sun? A freezing cold night might require several layers to stop the chills, while a sunny afternoon may call for a cap, sunglasses, and even a layer of sunscreen if we're in direct sunlight for 2 or 3 hours in a traditionally hot country. Personally, I don't think you can ever be over-prepared when it comes to having enough supplies of the consumable variety. I don't know what it is, but I get the munchies big time when I'm working on a match. and I've been caught short so many times covering games in the past. We need to find out in advance if the stadium we're working at provides any food for the media. These days, most, if not all, Premier League clubs in England provide a decent meal and drinks before kick-off and sometimes even at half-time. But many lower league or non-league clubs have limited or no complimentary refreshments. If that's the case, we should stock up on easily transportable food and water before we set off. Incidentally, here's a tip. Always drink room temperature water if you're commentating or reporting. It's a golden rule for any broadcaster or voice actor who's going to spend a lot of time talking. Chilled water can tighten the vocal cords. Caffeinated drinks like coffee and tea can dry out the larynx. So stay hydrated as much as possible. Last but by no means least is the fact that we may be required to do post-match interviews with coaches and players, sometimes very soon after the final whistle. In a lot of cases at large stadiums, the distance between the press box or commentary position and the players' tunnel or press room can be considerable, especially when we have to negotiate our way through the traffic of thousands of departing fans while juggling all of our belongings. It can, in some instances, take up to 10 minutes to get from a commentary position to the interview location and be ready to conduct interviews. If you're working for television, you'll have the benefit of a floor manager who will be based in the tunnel and will be liaising with the club's media officers about when you'll be in position. However, if you're a lone radio commentator or reporter, you don't have that luxury. If I know I'm going to be doing post-match interviews a long way from my position, I always take time before the game to work out how I get there, how long it'll take me, and ensure I speak to the media officers of both clubs to make them aware that I might be a few minutes getting to them. And it's definitely worth speaking to the home club, as they'll probably need to provide us with the right access. Or we might want the coach or player to come up to the live position. It can be one of the most stressful parts of a match day, but once it's all over, we can take a deep breath before beginning the long journey home.